Sega's last console, the Dreamcast, turned 25 this year, and game prices suggest that it's more popular than it was when it was first released in 1999. So let's look at some price trends on this episode of Retronomics. Welcome to Retronomics, the series that follows price trends in video games, and today we're looking at the Sega Dreamcast. I think it's pretty obvious that the Dreamcast was a great console despite the stiff competition from Sony, who would watch Sega release their console in 1999, then release the PlayStation 2 with backwards compatibility and a DVD player just a year later, further solidifying their dominance in the marketplace. 25 years later, a lot of the more popular Dreamcast games are really high in price after their initial rise during the 2020 price boom, leaving a lot of people to wonder if prices will ever come down or if this is just the lowest they are before they get even higher. Well, that's where I come in. I took 277 listings from PriceCharting.com and charted their prices since the beginning of 2024. If you like these types of videos, make sure that you're subscribed, like, and share this video with a friend who might find it interesting. We'll get into price trends in just a moment, but first, here's how Retronomics works. I get all of my prices from PriceCharting.com, which gets their prices from eBay sold listings and prices on their site to determine a trend. The value of each game isn't necessarily what you should pay, but a reference for what sellers should charge. Sure, you can find games for less or pay more for something in better condition, but for the sake of this video, we're talking about price trends. I suggest going to my PlayStation 2 video where I go into a little bit more detail about how price charting works and why I consider using it. The prices are from the start of the year until September. They're North American CIB copies. I included every listing price charting has on the console, including accessories, prototypes, and random knickknacks price charting happens to put on their site. That being said, I only evaluated prices from items that were on price charting site as of January 2020 and had a price over $1 for every month since then. If it was missing even one price, I excluded it. And there's one game that I excluded just because it had a junk price, but I'll go over that later on in this video. Out of 428 Dreamcast listings on PriceCharting.com, only 277 met that criteria. So let's get into some price trends. Since we're going over 9 months, there's a lot of stats to go over, but we'll start broad, then zero in on some key points that I discovered along the way. We'll start with the breakdown of 277 listings. I separated them into 5 different categories: under $1, $1 to $5, $6 to $10, $11 to $20, $21 to $49, $50 to $99, $100 to $200, and over $200. And at the beginning of the year, the price breakdown is as follows. Fast forward to September, the rest of the numbers are slightly different, this time with the biggest changing happening in the middle of the price range, $11 to $20 range and the $21 to $49 range, with 11 to 20 increasing by 8 listings and 21 to 49 decreasing by 12 listings. And normally this is the part of the video where I go over my personal collection, and I really don't have a lot of Sega Dreamcast games to show off. I have Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Soul Reaver, Space Channel 5, and some others, but the range of games doesn't mirror the breakdown like the other videos because I just don't have a lot of games. So we'll just move on to the dollar breakdown, the totals at the start and the end of the year. At the start of the year, the total of all 277 listings was $12,917.13. At the end of quarter one, that total was $13,039.84, which is a difference of $122.71. Start of Q2 was $13,363.64, and at the end of Q2 it was $13,748 for a total of $384 of an increase. Start of Q3, $13,288.61, and the end of Q3, September, $13,266.72 for a drop of $21.89. Now, while that's a breakdown of quarter to quarter, when you compare the end of September to the beginning of the year, the prices are up $349.59, or a 2.7% increase. It's not really significant. There was a substantial increase in quarter two, and that's all to do with the month of May, which saw an increase in price of $341.17. When you look at the breakdown of listings in May, you can see which ranges had the most. 96 listings were in the $21 to $49 range. So what happened during this time? Honestly, that's what I've been trying to figure out. When you look at the games that increased the most in that month, there weren't a lot of substantial increases. Project Justice increased the most by $56, followed by JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, then D2, and it seems to be just on average. It was a month where people were buying Dreamcast games. If you have any insight on the specific reason, let me know in the comments below. I know that the month before E3 or Game Fest or whatever the heck they call it these days is a time where prices generally increase, but Dreamcast games in particular didn't stand out in the Google search trends. Now sure, we're looking at prices on the whole, but I did track how many of each increased and decreased the most across 8 categories, and here they are. Between January and September, out of the 156 listings that increased, only 3 listings didn't change in value, but 76 increased $1 to $5, and then it just trailed off after that. The majority of the listings that increased in value didn't increase more than $20, which indicates that while Dreamcast prices rose 3% overall, it was mostly spread out across all of the listings instead of concentrated to a handful of games. It's notable to point out that only 12 listings increased between $21 and $100, and no listings at all increased over $100. The other systems that I've covered so far this year increased over $100. Given the size of the Dreamcast library and the rarity of certain games, it's interesting to see that the average increase was $20 or less. When you look at the percentage breakdown, it's a bit more distributed across the ranges. 43 listings that increased this year increased 11 to 20%, followed by 38 increasing 21 to 49%, and 32 1 to 5%. So the majority of the listings increased anywhere between 1 and 50%. Let's drill down further and look at the individual games that increased or decreased the most, starting with the top 25 games that increased the most. I tracked the top 25 games that increased the most over the year and also by each quarter to see if there are any repeat games. Now, I'm not going to go over each list for each quarter. If there's enough interest, I can create a Retronomics blog where I cover these trends in a bit more detail, so let me know in the comments below if that's something that you would be interested in. So here are the top 25 games that increased the most for the year. Typical who's who of the Dreamcast games: Resident Evil 2, Sonic Adventure 2, Seaman, Power Stone, but also a couple of controllers. Since I'm tracking prices by each quarter, I took account of how many times each game ranked in the top 25 and how they appeared on each of the quarters tracked. While only 3 games, Daytona USA, Seaman Base Bundle, and Street Fighter Alpha 3 appeared on only the YTD list, 14 games appeared on the quarter list, and the yellow Dreamcast controller, Bangai O, Illibleed, ECW Anarchy Rules with a Z, and Cannon Spike appeared on the list 2 quarters and the year to date, but only 1 game, Tech Romancer, appeared on the list all 3 quarters. Notable on this list is Power Stone, which did get a release date on modern consoles, albeit in a compilation, but it's still physical, and Capcom is really making their previous games available, which could be a reason why Dreamcast prices are finally starting to level off. Tech Romancer increased 40.92% for the first 9 months of the year. It had been trending down going into 2024, but reached a peak price of $215 in June. With 2 sales a week, the game still does fetch a decent price depending on the condition, so I don't think that we'll see a significant drop anytime soon. But with so many sales, it appears that you can just wait for a price that you're comfortable with and pull the trigger. Now, let's take a look at the top 25 games that increased the most percentage-wise, and it shows a slightly different layout. 7 games on this list didn't break the top 25 during each individual quarter, and the rest only appeared on one quarter in addition to this list. But most of these games are under $100, which makes it easy to get on this list for percentage increases. NFL 2K1 increased 157%, and that sounds impressive until you see that the current price is $8. But the Maracas, Yellow Dreamcast Controller, and KO the Kangaroo are examples of instances where 30% or more gains are significant. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver seeing a bump is also not surprising given the recent announcement of remasters coming to the console. I love that game, but it is one of the last 3D games before dual analog sticks, so you have to stop and look around, which can be cumbersome to a generation of gamers unaware that that was even a thing. And just as I tracked the increases, I also tracked the decreases. We'll start with the breakdown of 121 listings that dropped from January to September of 2024. The majority of the listings that dropped in value dropped $5 or less. 66 listings dropped between $1 and $5, with 31 dropping less than $1. Of course, dollar value could mean higher priced games undergoing a correction, but we'll get into individual changes in just a moment. But let's take a look at the percentage decreases. When you look at the percentage decreases, most of the games that dropped in value dropped under 20% of their initial value. While more listings increased than decreased, the distribution of changes mirror each other, with the majority of listings decreasing under 50%, with just one listing, the Dreamcast console itself, dropping the most. A complete inbox version has dropped $150 or 52% since the start of the year, which leads me to assume that coupled with weak increases of the more popular games, it's probably a good time to start buying Dreamcast games if you were looking for a reason to start. Now let's take a look at the Dreamcast listings that dropped in value, starting with the top 25 games that decreased. Remember at the beginning of the video where I said that I left off one specific game so that the list was only 277? Well, it turns out that Sonic Adventure Limited Edition decreased a whopping 87% in just a couple of months. It dropped so much that Dreamcast prices were down by $30 since the beginning of the year. So why did I exclude it? Well, I'll tell you, it's because for some reason people on eBay were just listing the regular Sonic Adventure as limited edition, and because it's selling, price charting is picking it up as the limited version that's $400. I've gone over this before in the PlayStation 2 video, but I'll repeat it again. Price charting is a valuable resource if you use all of the resources that they offer to determine if the price is what it's supposed to be. Price charting takes the past 30 sold listings for each title and runs it through their own algorithm to determine a price. Most of the time, these listing errors don't impact the price all that much because most games sell up to 7 times a week and the algorithm accounts for that. However, on rare games like Sonic Adventure Limited Edition, if there's a rise in sales, price charting is going to notice and the price is going to be affected. In this case, putting limited edition on a game that's actually just worth $40 is going to cause the overall price of that listing to plummet, which it did. However, authentic copies of Sonic the Hedgehog Limited Edition appear to be unaffected. I found this out because price charting is transparent and lists the most recent sold listings under the price, so I can click through and determine what exactly went wrong if I find any type of anomalies. I reported that errant listing and notified the owner of pricecharting.com directly to improve the site and prevent this from happening. While I don't have a monetary stake in price charting, I actually paid them to make these videos, I still think it's important to maintain the integrity of the data and the reputation of Retronomics by letting you know when I come across these errors so that you can be on the lookout and be educated when you are researching on your own to see if a game is actually worth buying. And it only seems to happen with rarer games. Anyone looking to manipulate the price on pricecharting.com though might want to think twice, because even with reproductions of a game like Little Samson, it doesn't appear to affect the price of authentic, sought after copies. Whew, sorry for the long rant, but Here are the top 25 games that decreased in value after Sonic Adventure Limited Edition was removed. I think that this is more interesting than the increases because 1. A CIB Dreamcast has dropped more than half its value since the beginning of the year, more than $200 less than its peak in August of 2023. And also, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2 are starting to drop now that Disney and Capcom have reached a deal to re-release the games on PC and modern consoles. Power Stone 2 is on this list as well, and while a drop in prices aren't super significant for the year, when you look at the month-to-month price trend, you can see that the majority of the drop has happened in just the past 3 months. Prior to the re-release announcement, the price had been steadily climbing. Maybe more companies should re-release their stuff. They get money and collectors can save if they want to collect the game on the Dreamcast. This is more evident when you switch to the percentage drop. Marvel vs. Capcom, both the All-Stars and regular version have dropped 34%, and the Dreamcast console, of course, dropping 52%. One thing to note is that the top 25 games that decreased the most were mostly unique to this year-to-date list. Looking back at the previous 3 quarters, it was almost a different set each time, which would track since the largest decrease only happened during 1 month, with prices nearly dropping $500. So I've took a look at the top 25 games that increased and the top 25 that decreased. What about games that my subscribers wanted me to take a look at? Well, in the previous Retronomics format, I did a write-up of all 28 games, but now the answer is more or less the same. Buy now or wait. So this time I'll list them off and pick a couple to show you their individual price trends and why I think that it's significant. If you take all 28 game prices from January and September and add them all up, the January total was $2,587.26 and September total $2,598.98, an increase of $11.72, a whopping 0.75% increase, basically negligible. While not on the same increase level as the overall market, remember that I included everything, not just the games. And also it's because you guys picked the games. Not that it's your fault, but it's no surprise that games people are actually interested in tend to have a more biased price leaning. This is evident when you break it down by price distribution. The majority of the titles are over $50 compared to the entire market where the majority was under $50. 17 of the games are over $50 compared to 12 under. This is the same for January and September, but the distribution changed slightly. The 50 to 99 and 100 to 200 bracket both increased by 1, where the 6 to 10 and over 200 bracket decreased by 1. The game that dropped below $200 was the Dreamcast console, and the game that left the 6 to 10 bracket was Virtua Tennis, which had been teetering on the bracket at $9.98. It increased to $14.17, which was a 42% increase. Now you can see why I include both dollar increases and percentage increases. $4 isn't really that dramatic of an increase, but 42%, that seems like a lot. I try to keep it honest around here, which is probably why I don't reach a wider audience, but oh well. Shifting to price change breakdown, 20 games on this list increased in value while 8 decreased in value, and the breakdown is here. Now, this is where the list is similar to the overall market. Not exactly as they were, but more of a percentage that increased between $11 and $20, but still, the bulk of the listings increased $1 to $5, which is in line to the overall market. Smaller sample size means bigger percentages, but comparatively, they're similar. The decreases were similar as well. The majority of the listings didn't decrease more than $5. The percentage increase are similar to with some slight variation. And that's a good thing, because I've said in the past that you should be able to take a sample of the overall market and it should be pretty close to the trend of the overall market. especially since these games weren't picked at random. They were picked specifically because my subscribers were interested in these specific games. I'm sure if it was randomized, it would be a bit closer to the overall market trend, and if the overall market didn't include controllers and other accessories. So there you have it, a year-to-date report on the Sega Dreamcast. Despite prices increasing 3% overall, you could chalk that increase to a margin of error. I included every single listing on price charting site, including controllers, so if you were to focus on games and only official games, you would probably be closer to the subscriber picks change in value, which was barely a percentage increase. So the question remains, will prices go up, down, or stay the same? Well, they're most likely to drop a little bit more overall. Looking from September to June, prices are down $481 or 3.5%. The first 6 months rose the most by 6.4%, which is why year to date we're at 2.7%. Looking at the same range last year in 2023, the prices from June to September were down $20.85 or 0.23%, and the first 6 months they were up a quarter of a percentage point. For the complete 2023 year, January to December, prices were down $148.98 or 1.15%. Combine that with the re-release of expensive games like Power Stone and Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on modern consoles, you could see those games driving the overall market down further as time goes on. But the good news is that prices aren't fluctuating as wildly as they were during the 2020 price boom, and you can now afford to wait for a price that you're comfortable with in the condition that you're looking for, knowing that you won't get ripped off. So thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you're watching this and you still haven't subscribed, consider doing so. These videos are fun to make and I want to reach as many people as possible, so liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the videos around the internet to people who would be interested in this sort of thing are the best ways to support the channel, and best of all, it doesn't cost you anything. Of course, you can always leave a super thanks or tip me via Buy Me a Coffee, and links will be in the description below. And you can follow me on social media of your choice at snicktendo. I am more active on Blue Sky now, more than Twitter, and then I am on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, but the username is all the same. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Nick, and I'll see you next time.